What if I told you that right now, at this exact moment, American soldiers deployed in the Middle East, in Europe, and across the Pacific are carrying Chinese-made technology directly on their bodies? Not in their phones, not in their personal bags, inside their uniforms, inside their equipment, inside the gear that is supposed to keep them alive. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand something that most people in Washington are desperately trying to keep quiet. Most people assume the US military builds everything itself. American weapons, American technology, American factories. But most people completely miss what's actually inside the equipment. You see, modern military gear isn't one simple object built in one factory. A single piece of body armor contains over 200 individual components. Boots contain pressure sensors. Helmets contain communication chips. Even the thread used to stitch a uniform together can contain conductive fibers with embedded tracking capability. And here's what makes this so alarming. In 2023, a routine Pentagon audit of military supply chains found something that made investigators stop cold. Microchips sourced from Chinese manufacturers had been identified inside components used in US military gear. Not counterfeit chips smuggled in by spies, legitimate components purchased legally through official defense contractors. The chips were there because nobody looked closely enough at where the parts actually came from. To start, understand how this is even possible. The US defense industry doesn't manufacture every single component from scratch. It buys parts from suppliers. Those suppliers buy parts from other suppliers. And somewhere down that chain, often 4 or 5 levels deep, a Chinese factory is making something small, something that seems harmless. A capacitor, a sensor, a timing chip. But this alone isn't enough to understand why it's so dangerous. Here's what makes it different. A chip the size of a grain of rice can store data. It can transmit a signal. In the right conditions, it can tell someone exactly where it is. And when that chip is sewn into the uniform of a special operations soldier on a classified mission, the implications are terrifying. But wait, because what I'm about to tell you next is the part that nobody is talking about. This isn't just about one audit. This isn't a single incident that got quietly fixed. The problem runs through almost every category of military equipment. The scale is staggering. The US Department of Defense spends over $400 billion per year on equipment and supplies. Managing every component in every product across thousands of contractors is, by the Pentagon's own admission, nearly impossible with current systems. In 2021, the Government Accountability Office released a report that found the DoD could not fully trace the origins of components in 90% of its major weapon systems. Not 10%, not 30%, 90%. Let that number sit for a moment. Then, in 2022, the National Defense Authorization Act, the law that governs military spending, included emergency provisions specifically targeting Chinese-made components in military supply chains. The fact that Congress had to write that into law tells you everything about how serious the problem already was. But here's the part that changes everything. It's not just passive components sitting inside equipment doing nothing. A senior defense contractor analyst who worked on supply chain security reviews described it this way. We kept finding Chinese components in places we never expected to look. The assumption was always that the critical systems were protected. What we missed was everything around the critical systems. The support equipment, the wearables, the things soldiers use every single day. And this is where it gets truly terrifying. Most people imagine a spy chip like something from a movie, a glowing device, something obviously out of place. The reality is the opposite. Modern surveillance components are designed to be invisible. They are built to look exactly like legitimate parts. They pass standard electrical tests. They function correctly. And they do their secondary jobs silently, collecting, storing, or transmitting data without anyone knowing. Consider what data a chip inside military gear could collect. Location data. Every time a soldier moves, a GPS-capable chip logs coordinates. Over days and weeks, that data builds a pattern. Where soldiers sleep, where they gather, which routes they use, which buildings they enter. But this alone isn't enough to understand the full picture. Chips embedded near radio equipment can capture signal frequencies, transmission times, and communication patterns. Even without breaking encryption, that metadata tells an adversary enormous amounts about how a unit operates. And here's the strangest part. Some of the most dangerous chips don't transmit anything at all. They store. They quietly log data for weeks or months. And then, when a soldier returns to base, when they pass near a compatible receiver, the chip uploads everything it collected. Passively, automatically, without any visible sign that anything happened. One former NSA technical director described the concept simply: you don't need to hack the network if you can harvest the person walking through it. Keep watching, because the next part completely changes how you see this. The companies selling equipment to the US military are not Chinese companies. They are American companies, with American names, American headquarters, American executives. But the global manufacturing reality means that major American defense suppliers routinely use overseas factories for component production. And China remains the world's dominant manufacturer of electronic components, producing over 60% of the world's semiconductors at the consumer and industrial level as of 2024. Here's what most people completely miss. When a US company wins a Pentagon contract worth $800 million to supply body armor, they don't build the pressure plates in their own factory. They source them from a supplier, who sources the embedded sensors from another supplier, who buys the microcontrollers from the cheapest available manufacturer. And the cheapest available manufacturer is almost always in China. But this isn't negligence, it's math. A Chinese-made timing chip costs $0.003. An American-made equivalent costs 31 cents. Multiply that across millions of components and billions of dollars of contracts, and procurement officers choose the cheaper option every single time. The Pentagon knew this was happening, and for years, they looked the other way because the alternative, rebuilding an entire domestic semiconductor manufacturing base, would cost hundreds of billions of dollars and take decades. But here's what I haven't told you yet. Some of these components aren't just passively dangerous. In 2018, Bloomberg Businessweek reported that Chinese intelligence operatives had successfully inserted microchips into server hardware manufactured for major US companies. Chips so small, they were described as the size of a sharpened pencil tip. The report sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. The companies denied it. The government neither confirmed nor denied it. But 3 months later, the Pentagon quietly accelerated its trusted microelectronics initiative by $1.7 billion. Draw your own conclusions. Most people think this is a problem that gets solved with one new law or one new policy. But most people completely miss how deep the roots go. Rebuilding a domestic supply chain for military-grade components isn't like switching suppliers for office furniture. It requires new factories, new trained workforces, new testing infrastructure, new certification processes. The CHIPS Act of 2022 committed $52 billion to rebuilding American semiconductor manufacturing. It was the largest single investment in domestic chip production in US history. But here's the brutal reality. Even with that investment, experts estimate it will take 10 to 15 years before the US has sufficient domestic capacity to fully replace Chinese-sourced components in military supply chains. 10 to 15 years. That means every soldier deployed today, every uniform worn, every helmet strapped on, every boot laced up, still contains components whose full origin cannot be guaranteed. And even as the US works to rebuild domestic manufacturing, China is not standing still. Chinese semiconductor technology is advancing. Chinese manufacturers are becoming harder to identify through component markings alone. And the methods used to embed surveillance capability are becoming smaller, more sophisticated, and more difficult to detect. A defense intelligence analyst who reviewed classified supply chain assessments put it this way: "We are in a race where we started late, the track keeps getting longer, and the other runner keeps getting faster, That's not a comfortable position. And this is the part that should make every American pay attention. The US military is preparing for potential conflict with China over Taiwan, over the South China Sea, over dominance in the Pacific. Military planners are wargaming scenarios, positioning forces, upgrading weapons. But here's what I haven't told you yet. If conflict begins, and American soldiers deploy with Chinese-made components in their gear, those components could, in theory, give Beijing a real-time picture of exactly where US forces are, how they're moving, and what patterns they follow. Not through satellites, not through hacking, through the uniform on a soldier's back. The Pentagon's response has been to accelerate the Trusted Capital Marketplace, a program that vets defense suppliers specifically for supply chain security. As of 2025, over 300 companies have been enrolled, but the program is voluntary. And the defense industrial base has over 300,000 companies in it. The math doesn't work in America's favor. Here's what makes this story different from every other military technology story. Most threats come from outside: missiles, hackers, enemy aircraft. This threat was invited in, not by spies, not by traitors, by accountants choosing the cheapest component on a spreadsheet, by procurement officers hitting quarterly targets, by a system that optimized for cost and forgot to optimize for security. A retired Army colonel who spent 12 years working on defense acquisition put it simply: "We built the most powerful military in the world, and then we outsourced the parts to the one country most likely to use that against us." History will find that very hard to explain. He's right. The chip inside the uniform isn't the weapon. The assumption that it couldn't be there, that's the weapon. So here's the question I want you to think about. If this has been known inside the Pentagon for years, if Congress has written laws about it, if billions have been spent trying to fix it, why is it the first time most people are hearing about it today? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this video made you see something differently, you know what to do.